The vessel girl shouldn't even be here. She pollutes the sacred ground. The words hit Lyra like physical blows, each syllable designed to remind her of exactly what she was worth in this world. Nothing. Less than nothing. She felt them settle into the familiar ache behind her ribs, the place where she stored every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every reminder that she existed only to serve. Lyra kept her head down as she knelt beside the ceremonial fire pit, feeding sacred herbs into flames that would burn throughout the ancient awakening ceremony. The smoke curled upward, carrying prayers and offerings to whatever ancient forces still watched over the Packlands. She had been tending these fires since before dawn, her hands steady despite the exhaustion that lived in her bones like a permanent resident. "Look at her, scurrying around like the servant she is," another voice sneered. "Can you imagine if the Guardian actually noticed her? The shame would destroy our bloodline forever." Laughter rippled through the gathered crowd, sharp and cutting. Lyra's wolf, buried so deep inside her that she sometimes wondered if it existed at all, whimpered at the mockery. She pressed her lips together and focused on her task, arranging kindling with practiced precision. That had always been enough. Keep quiet, stay invisible, endure until the moment passed. The ancient stone chamber dominated the ceremonial grounds like a sleeping giant. Massive blocks of weathered granite formed walls that had stood since the first packs claimed these territories, covered in runes that seemed to shift and move when she wasn't looking directly at them. At the centre of the chamber sat the Guardian, a creature carved from stone and legend, its eyes closed in slumber that had lasted centuries. Today the Guardian would wake. Today it would choose. "Celine looks radiant, doesn't she?" The pack elder's voice carried across the courtyard with deliberate volume. "The Guardian will recognize true nobility when it sees her. She was born for this moment." Lyra glanced up despite herself, catching sight of Selene standing at the chamber's entrance like she already owned it. Everything about the woman screamed perfection, from her gleaming auburn hair to the ceremonial white robes that seemed to glow against her bronze skin. She stood with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world, never questioned whether she deserved to breathe the same air as her betters. The contrast was deliberate. Lyra wore rough-spun grey, the colour of shadows and forgotten things. Her dark hair hung limp around her face, unwashed and unkempt because vessel girls didn't deserve the luxury of vanity. She existed to serve, to maintain the sacred spaces, to ensure everything was perfect for those who mattered. "The bloodline runs true in her," another pack member murmured reverently. "Look how the very air responds to her presence. The Guardian will bow before such purity." Purity. The word twisted something bitter in Lyra's chest. She had heard it whispered about Selena countless times, always with the unspoken comparison hanging in the air like smoke. Selene was pure, noble, worthy. Lyra was polluted, common, disposable. The ancient ritual required specific preparations. Sacred stones arranged in precise patterns, blessed oils burning in copper braziers, herbs gathered at moonrise and dried according to traditions older than memory. Lyra had overseen every detail, her hands touching every element that would welcome the Guardian back to consciousness. Yet she would not be permitted to witness the choosing. That honour belonged to the worthy. "Move aside, vessel girl." Celine's voice cut through Lyra's thoughts like a blade. "Your part in this is finished. Go tend the livestock where you belong." Lyra looked up to find Selene standing directly above her, radiant and terrible as a goddess. The ceremonial crown of silver leaves rested in her auburn hair, catching the firelight and throwing dancing shadows across her perfect features. She looked down at Lyra with the kind of dismissive coldness reserved for insects that dared to exist in sacred spaces. "I still need to," Lyra began, gesturing toward the unfinished preparations. "You need to remember your place." Celine's eyes flashed with something darker than mere disdain. The Guardian will wake to choose its vessel, and it will not be contaminated by the presence of something like you. Leave. Now. The gathered crowd watched with the hungry attention of spectators at an execution. This was entertainment for them, watching the vessel girl be reminded of her worthlessness on the most sacred day in generations. Lyra felt their stares like brands against her skin, marking her as other, as wrong, as fundamentally broken. She rose slowly, her knees protesting after hours of kneeling on stone. The sacred fire crackled behind her, the flame she had nursed from nothing now burning bright enough to light the ancient chamber. Everything was ready, everything was perfect, everything except her. The ancient awakening begins at sunset, the pack elder announced, his voice carrying the weight of centuries-old tradition. Those chosen by bloodline and breeding will enter the sacred chamber. The Guardian will wake, and it will choose the vessel most worthy to channel its ancient power. Lyra walked away from the ceremony grounds with measured steps, her spine straight despite the weight of their contempt pressing down on her shoulders. She had spent her whole life being told she was nothing, being treated as less than. But what if they had all been wrong? The thought flickered through her mind like candlelight, fragile and easily extinguished. What if she was something more than they could see? The question followed her into the shadows beyond the sacred fire's reach, where vessel girls belonged, where the light never touched, where ancient creatures slumbered and dreams waited to wake. The crown of the first pack had been hidden for 20 years, buried beneath the sacred altar where ancient queens had once knelt to receive their royal blessing. Lysandra stood in the ceremonial chamber as Elder Mira carefully unearthed the artifact, her weathered hands trembling with reverence as she lifted away stones that had concealed this treasure since the night an infant princess was smuggled away to safety. The crown emerged from its hiding place like a star pulled from the darkness, silver leaves and ancient gemstones catching the torchlight with ethereal beauty. "It waited for you," Mira whispered, tears streaming down her lined cheeks. 20 years it waited, knowing that someday the rightful heir would return to claim what was always hers. The Guardian stood sentinel in the chamber's entrance, its massive form radiating approval as it witnessed the restoration of what had been stolen. Pack members filled the space beyond, nobles and commoners alike drawn by the power that thrummed through the air like a heartbeat, like destiny finally finding its rhythm. Darius stood beside her, his silver eyes bright with something between pride and awe as he watched her transform from the broken vessel girl he had first glimpsed into the queen she had always been meant to be. The mate bond hummed between them, golden and warm, a connection that no political arrangement could sever. "The ancient laws are clear," Elder Marcus announced, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden hush. His earlier terror had given way to resignation, then to a kind of relief as he finally spoke truths that had been buried for decades. "When the first pack bloodline manifests, when the Guardian acknowledges the heir, all territorial disputes are subject to ancient right. The true Queen's authority supersedes all other claims." Lysandra felt the weight of generations settling on her shoulders as Mira approached with the crown. This was more than ceremony, more than political theatre. This was the restoration of a bloodline, the awakening of power that had slumbered for too long, the correction of an injustice that had lasted 20 years. "Your mother wore this crown," Mira said softly, positioning the silver circlet with careful reverence. "Your grandmother before her. It has waited through darkness for the light of your awakening." The moment the crown touched her head, power exploded through the chamber like lightning made manifest. Ancient magic, stored in silver and stone for decades, recognized its rightful bearer and surged to life. Every candle flame danced higher, every shadow deepened, every person present felt the electric charge of destiny fulfilled. Lysandra was no longer just a girl with awakened abilities. She was a queen, crowned and acknowledged, carrying the authority of bloodlines that predated kingdoms. "Kneel," Darius commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority as he addressed the assembled pack. "Kneel before Lysandra, first pack heir, guardians chosen, your rightful queen." The response was immediate and unanimous. Every person in the chamber dropped to their knees, heads bowed in acknowledgement of the power they could no longer deny. Even Elder Marcus, who had participated in her suppression, bent before the truth that blazed like silver fire around her crowned form. "Rise," Lysandra said quietly, her voice somehow reaching every corner of the vast space. "Rise, and know that mercy governs justice in my reign. Those who acted against me from ignorance rather than malice will find forgiveness. Those who serve loyally will find reward. Those who threaten what we are building together will find consequences." As the pack rose, messenger wolves began arriving with news that spread like wildfire across the territories. Smaller packs, those who remembered the old stories, were already sending delegations to pledge their allegiance to the restored bloodline. Ancient territorial laws, dormant for generations, were awakening as surely as the power in Lysandra's veins. "The northern reaches have declared for you," one messenger reported, breathless from his urgent journey. "The mountain clans remember the silver wolves of legend. They say their elders dreamed of this day." "The coastal packs request audience," another added. "Their shamans felt the awakening power from across the sea. They wish to renew oaths sworn by their ancestors to your bloodline." With each report, Lysandra felt the scope of what she had inherited expanding beyond anything she had imagined. This was not just about one pack, one territory, one political arrangement. This was about the restoration of a system of government that predated modern kingdoms, a return to rule by those who carried magic in their blood rather than armies in their service. "The wild packs will submit or be driven from our borders," she announced, her voice carrying the certainty of ancient authority. "Rogues who prey on our people will face justice. The chaos that has plagued these lands will end." Darius moved to stand beside her, his presence both supportive and protective, as he watched her grow into the role that fit her like destiny made manifest. "Equal rulers," he said quietly, but his words carried to every listening ear. "Partners in all things, your territories and mine, united not by political necessity, but by the bond that connects our souls." The implications were staggering. Two of the most powerful bloodlines in the known world, joined by mate bond and mutual choice rather than arranged marriage and diplomatic convenience. The stability this partnership could bring to war-torn territories was beyond calculation. "The mating ceremony will take place in 3 days," Lysandra declared, silver light pulsing brighter around her crowned form. "All allied packs are welcome to witness the joining that will reshape the political landscape of our world." As the crowd began to disperse, chattering excitedly about the changes sweeping through their reality, Lysandra remained in the chamber with Darius and the Guardian. The ancient creature's golden eyes reflected contentment as it observed the queen it had waited centuries to serve. "Are you ready for this?" Darius asked quietly, his fingers intertwining with hers. "For the weight of kingdoms, for the responsibility of ruling territories that span from mountains to sea?" Lysandra looked up at him, this king who had chosen her over duty, over politics, over everything he had been taught to value above personal happiness. The crown felt natural on her head now, the power comfortable in her veins, the authority settled in her bones like coming home. "I spent 20 years believing I was nothing," she said softly. "Nothing but a servant, a vessel, a broken thing unworthy of notice or kindness. But I was never broken. I was hidden, suppressed, waiting for the moment when truth would finally be stronger than lies." She squeezed his hands, drawing strength from the mate bond that connected them more surely than any political alliance ever could. "I am ready," she whispered. "I am ready to be everything they tried to prevent me from becoming." The guardian's song filled the chamber then, ancient and joyful, a sound like the world celebrating its own restoration. In 3 days she would stand beside Darius as his equal, his partner, his mate in all things. But tonight she was simply Lysandra, the lost princess who had found her way home, the vessel girl who had discovered she was actually the most precious thing of all, the queen she had always been, finally awake to claim her crown. The sacred grove where everything had begun was transformed for the mating ceremony, silver flowers woven through ancient branches and moonstone paths leading to an altar carved from starlight itself. Lysandra stood at the grove's heart, wearing robes of ethereal white that seemed to capture and hold the evening light, her first pack crown gleaming like captured stars against her dark hair. 3 days had passed since her coronation, 3 days of delegations arriving from across the territories to witness what would reshape the political landscape forever. The guardian waited beside the altar, its massive form radiating ancient approval as pack after pack filled the ceremonial space. Wolves who had travelled from mountain peaks and coastal shores, from forest depths and desert edges, all drawn by the awakening power that sang through the mate bond connecting two souls destined for each other. "Beautiful," Eldamira whispered beside her, tears of joy streaming down weathered cheeks. "Your mother would be so proud to see you claiming everything that was stolen, everything you were meant to be." Darius appeared at the grove's entrance, and Lysandra's breath caught at the sight of him. He wore ceremonial robes of midnight blue that made his silver eyes seem to glow in the twilight, a crown of northern silver marking him as king, as her equal, as the mate her soul had recognized from the first moment she saw him. The assembled packs fell silent as he walked toward her, his gaze never leaving her face. The mate bond hummed between them like golden thread, visible to those with the sight, undeniable to any who witnessed the way power itself seemed to celebrate their union. "We gather tonight," the guardian's voice resonated through every mind present, ancient words carrying the weight of ceremony older than kingdoms, "to witness the joining of souls that destiny has bound together. King and queen, alpha and alpha, mates chosen by forces greater than politics or convenience." Darius reached the altar and took her hands in his, silver light and golden warmth dancing between their intertwined fingers. "I choose you," he said quietly, his words carrying clearly through the grove's perfect acoustics. "Not for alliance or advantage, not for duty or political necessity, but because my soul knows yours, because you are the missing piece I never knew I was searching for." "I choose you," Lysandra replied, her voice steady with certainty that had been forged in fire and awakened in silver light. "Not because I am expected to, not because others have decided our fate, but because loving you feels like coming home, because you saw worth in me when I believed I was nothing, because you chose the impossible over the expected." The guardian lifted its massive head, ancient power flowing around the grove like visible music. "Then let the bond that exists in spirit be witnessed in flesh. Let what was always true be acknowledged by all who serve justice and honour love." Silver light erupted from Lysandra as golden fire blazed from Darius, the two powers intertwining until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. The mate bond, hidden and denied for so long, finally blazed free for all to see. Thread of starlight and flame, connecting souls that politics had tried to separate, love had tried to hide, and destiny had always intended to unite. "Mate," they spoke in unison, the word carrying power that made the ancient stones tremble with recognition. The assembled packs erupted in celebration, howls of joy echoing through the grove as witness was born to a union that would reshape their world. This was more than ceremony, more than political theatre. This was the restoration of balance, the return of rule by those who carried both power and wisdom in their blood. As the celebration swirled around them, Darius and Lysandra found themselves alone for a moment beside the altar where they had pledged their lives to each other. "I love you," he said simply, the words carrying the weight of absolute truth. "I love you," she replied, silver tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. 3 months later, Lysandra stood on the palace balcony overlooking territories that stretched to the horizon, her hand resting on the gentle curve of her growing belly. The wild packs had submitted or been driven from their borders. Rogue wolves found swift justice or fled to safer hunting grounds. Peace had settled over lands that had known only chaos for decades. "Happy?" Darius asked, joining her at the balcony's edge, his arms wrapping around her from behind with gentle reverence for the life they had created together. "Complete," she corrected softly, leaning back against the solid warmth of his chest. "For 20 years I felt like there was something missing inside me, something broken, something wrong, but it wasn't broken, it was just waiting." "Waiting for what?" he murmured against her hair. "Waiting for you, waiting for this, waiting for the moment when I would stop believing I was nothing and start understanding I was everything I was always meant to be." The sun set over their united territories, painting the sky in shades of silver and gold that matched the light dancing between their joined hands. In her womb, their child stirred with power that would carry both bloodlines forward into a future bright with possibility. Somewhere in the distance, the Guardian's song echoed across their lands, ancient and content, a lullaby for the peace they had built together. Lysandra had been the vessel girl who served in shadows, then the lost princess who discovered her crown, then the queen who claimed her throne. But tonight, in Darius's arms with their child growing beneath her heart, she was simply the woman who had learned that love was the truest recognition of all. 5 years had passed since the ancient guardian chose her, and the palace gardens where Lysandra now sat with her daughter bloomed with a peace that had seemed impossible in those dark days when she believed herself to be nothing. "Tell me the story again, Mamma," little Arya pleaded, her silver eyes bright with curiosity as she nestled closer on the marble bench overlooking their united territories. At 4 years old, she already showed signs of the ancient bloodline, her hair gleaming like moonlight, her presence commanding attention from every creature that crossed her path. "Which story, my star?" Lysandra asked, though she already knew the answer. Arya loved hearing about the vessel girl who discovered she was a queen, about the guardian who recognized truth when others saw only lies, about the love that conquered politics and duty to create the world they now inhabited. "The one about how you found out who you really were," Arya said solemnly, "about how you were never broken, just hidden." Lysandra smiled, silver light dancing around her fingers as she brushed a strand of platinum hair from her daughter's face. The power that had once terrified her now felt as natural as breathing, as comfortable as the crown that rested easy on her head after years of earned authority. "Once upon a time," she began, her voice carrying the cadence of beloved stories told countless times, "there was a girl who everyone called worthless. She served in the shadows, tended sacred fires, and believed every cruel word spoken about her value." "But she wasn't worthless," Arya interrupted, as she always did at this part. "No, little star, she was never worthless. She was a princess whose power was hidden to keep her safe, whose memories were buried to protect her from those who would destroy what they feared. She spent 20 years believing she was nothing when she was actually everything she was always meant to be." In the distance, the Guardian moved through the gardens with careful grace, its ancient form no longer imposing but protective, a gentle giant watching over the royal family it had waited centuries to serve. Flowers bloomed brighter in its wake, responding to power that had learned to nurture rather than merely dominate. "And then the Alpha King came," Arya continued eagerly. Then your father came, Lysandra corrected gently, and he saw through the lies that everyone else believed. He recognised the mate bond when politics said it was impossible, chose love when duty demanded sacrifice. Footsteps on the garden path made them both look up to see Darius approaching, his silver eyes warm with the contentment that had settled into his features over years of peaceful rule. Their son, barely 2 years old, rode on his father's shoulders with the fearless confidence of a child who had never known anything but love and protection. "Are we telling stories?" Darius asked as he settled beside them on the bench, lifting their son into his lap while Arya immediately climbed onto Lysandra's. "Mamma's telling me about when she learned she was a queen," Arya announced proudly. "Ah," Darius said with mock seriousness, "the most important story of all." Their son babbled happily, his golden eyes already showing flecks of silver that marked him as carrying both bloodlines. In his small hands, flowers bloomed spontaneously, infant magic responding to emotions he couldn't yet name, but somehow understood. "What's the most important part of the story?" Lysandra asked Arya, though she knew her daughter would give the same answer she always did. "That worth doesn't come from what other people think," Arya recited dutifully. "It comes from here." She pressed her small hand to her chest, over her heart, and love is what happens when someone sees who you really are and chooses you anyway. "Very good," Lysandra praised, kissing the top of her daughter's shining head. As the sun set over territories that had known peace for half a decade, painting the sky in shades of silver and gold, Lysandra reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From vessel girl to lost princess to awakened queen to beloved mother, each transformation had taught her something essential about the nature of worth and recognition and love. "Do you ever regret it?" Darius asked quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "The weight of the crown, the responsibility of kingdoms, the loss of the simple life you might have had?" Lysandra looked at her family gathered around her, at the peaceful territories stretching to the horizon, at the guardian moving through gardens where children played without fear. She felt the gentle weight of her crown, comfortable now after years of wearing it with earned dignity. She sensed the mate bond humming between her and Darius, golden and warm and stronger than any political alliance could ever be. "I spent 20 years believing I was meant for shadows," she said softly, "believing I deserved nothing more than serving others, staying invisible, accepting whatever scraps of kindness came my way. But I was wrong about what I deserved. I was wrong about who I was. I was wrong about what love could accomplish when it refused to accept lies as truth." She gathered both children closer, silver light dancing around all of them like captured starlight. "I regret nothing. Every moment of pain, every year of confusion, every day of believing I was worthless, it all led me here. To you, to them, to this peace we built together." "I love you," Darius said simply, the words carrying the same weight they had on their mating day, the same truth they would carry for all their years together. "I love you," she replied, as she always would. In the gathering twilight, 2 silver wolves emerged from the forest edge to play with the royal children, ancient guardians ensuring the next generation would grow up knowing they were precious, protected, worthy of every good thing the world could offer. The vessel girl who had believed she was nothing had become the queen who understood she was everything. And in the end, that recognition of self, of worth, of love that transcends circumstances was the most powerful magic of all. The earth trembled beneath approaching hooves long before the Alpha King came into view. Lyra felt it first in her bones, a deep vibration that seemed to resonate with something buried inside her chest. She paused in her task of hauling water from the sacred spring, the wooden bucket suddenly too heavy for her trembling hands. Around her, the pack members had gone still, their conversations dying mid-sentence as every wolf sensed the overwhelming presence drawing near. Alpha King Darius of the Northern Territories had arrived. When he finally appeared at the edge of the ceremonial grounds, mounted on a warhorse as black as midnight, Lyra understood why entire packs bent the knee at his approach. Power radiated from him like heat from forge fire, impossible to ignore, impossible to resist. He was carved from shadow and starlight, all sharp angles and predatory grace, with silver eyes that seemed to see through flesh and bone to the soul beneath. The assembled pack dropped to their bellies in perfect synchronization, a wave of submission that rippled across the courtyard. Lyra found herself on her knees without conscious thought, water buckets forgotten as her body responded to an authority older than civilization itself. "Rise," Darius commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute dominance. Even the wind seemed to obey, falling still as he dismounted with fluid precision. "I have come to witness the ancient awakening and to claim what alliance it may bring." Pack Elder Marcus stepped forward, his weathered face bright with nervous excitement. "Your Majesty honours us with your presence. The Guardian has slept for 3 centuries, waiting for this moment. When it wakes, when it chooses, the old powers will return to strengthen our territories." "And to unite them under proper rule," Darius replied, his gaze sweeping across the crowd with clinical assessment. "The northern borders grow unstable. Wild packs raid our settlements, while rogues claim territory that belongs to civilization. The Guardian's power could restore order to chaos." Lyra tried to make herself smaller, pressing closer to the ground, as his attention passed over her like winter wind. She was nothing, less than nothing, invisible in the way that servants and shadows were invisible. But for one impossible moment, his silver eyes seemed to linger on her face. The sensation was electric, lightning in her veins, fire in her lungs, recognition that made no sense crackling between them like a live wire. She gasped, the sound loud as a gunshot in the sudden silence, and his eyes widened with something that looked almost like shock. Then the moment shattered. Selene appeared at his side like she belonged there, her ceremonial robes catching the afternoon light as she offered a perfect curtsy. "Your Majesty," she purred, her voice honey-sweet with practiced seduction. "I am Selene of the Crimson Moon Pack. I believe our union will bring the stability you seek." The political weight of her words settled over the crowd like a blanket. Marriage, alliance, the binding of territories through blood and ceremony. Darius turned his attention to Selene, and Lyra felt the loss of his focus like a physical blow. "The betrothal was arranged by our respective councils," Darius acknowledged, his tone carefully neutral. "When the Guardian chooses you as its vessel, our territories will unite under ancient blessing. The wild packs will submit or be destroyed." When, not if. The certainty in his voice made Lyra's chest tighten with something that felt dangerously like loss. Of course the Guardian would choose Selene. Of course a creature of ancient wisdom would recognize nobility when it saw it. Of course Lyra's moment of impossible connection had been nothing more than imagination and wishful thinking. "The ceremony begins at sunset," Elder Marcus announced, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "The sacred chamber has been prepared according to the old rituals. When the Guardian wakes, it will choose the vessel most worthy to channel its power into our world." Lyra forced herself to her feet, retrieving the water buckets with hands that still trembled. She needed to finish her preparations before the ceremony began, needed to ensure every sacred fire burned bright, every offering was perfectly placed. That was her purpose here, her only purpose. But as she turned to go, she felt it again, that electric pull, that impossible recognition. She glanced back to find Darius watching her with an expression she couldn't name, confusion perhaps, or hunger. The look lasted only a heartbeat before Selene reclaimed his attention with a perfectly timed laugh, but it was enough. Enough to make Lyra stumble as she walked away. Enough to make her wonder if she was losing her mind. "The bloodline chants will begin within the hour," she heard Elder Marcus explaining to Darius. "We will call upon the ancient powers to witness our offering, to recognize the nobility present in our chosen vessel. The Guardian responds only to true breeding, Your Majesty, only to those born to carry such sacred responsibility. True breeding, nobility, sacred responsibility. All the things Lyra would never be, could never claim, had never been allowed to dream about. She was vessel girl, shadow girl, nothing girl. The Guardian would sleep forever before it acknowledged something like her. Yet as she carried sacred water toward the ceremonial fires, she could still feel Darius's eyes on her skin like brands, could still taste lightning on her tongue, could still hear her buried wolf whimpering with recognition, with longing, with impossible hope. The ancient awakening would begin soon. The Guardian would choose, and Lyra would watch from the shadows, invisible and forgotten, as the world changed without her. That had always been enough, but for the first time in her life she found herself wondering what would happen if it wasn't. The ancient chamber thrummed with power as the sun touched the horizon, casting long shadows across stone carved by hands that had turned to dust millennia ago. Lyra pressed herself against the outer wall, hidden behind a pillar where the ceremonial torchlight couldn't reach her. She shouldn't be here. Vessel girls watched from the servant quarters, if they were allowed to watch at all. But something had drawn her to this place, something deeper than curiosity, stronger than the fear of discovery. Inside the sacred circle, Selena stood radiant in ceremonial white, her auburn hair crowned with silver leaves that caught the firelight like stars. She held herself with the perfect posture of someone who had never doubted her destiny, never questioned her right to stand where legends were born. "Ancient Guardian, hear our call," Elder Marcus intoned, his voice echoing off stone walls that had witnessed centuries of such rituals. "We offer you a vessel worthy of your sacred power, one born of noble blood, raised in the old ways, prepared to channel your strength into our world." The Guardian sat motionless at the chamber's heart, exactly as it had for 300 years. Carved from granite darker than midnight, it resembled no earthly creature Lyra had ever seen. Part wolf, part dragon, part something altogether other. Its form seemed to shift in the dancing torchlight, massive shoulders and swept-back wings, creating shadows that moved independently of the flames. Closed stone eyelids gave no hint of the consciousness that supposedly slumbered within. "Come forward, chosen one," Elder Marcus commanded. "Let the Guardian look upon you and recognize what we have always known. You are worthy, you are pure, you are everything this sacred power requires." Selene stepped into the inner circle with fluid grace, her chin lifted in confident expectation. The assembled pack held its collective breath, waiting for the moment when legend would become reality, when the Guardian would wake, recognize her nobility, and bind itself to her service. Alpha King Darius watched from his place of honor, his silver eyes unreadable as stone. Lyra found herself studying his profile, memorizing the sharp line of his jaw, the way candlelight caught in his dark hair. After today, when he claimed Selene as both vessel and bride, she would never be close enough to see him again. The thought shouldn't have hurt. She was nothing to him, less than nothing. That moment of impossible recognition had been her imagination, desperate delusion born from a lifetime of invisibility. "Guardian of the ancient ways," Selene spoke, her voice carrying clearly through the sacred space. "I offer myself as your vessel. Accept my service and wake to protect our lands once more." Silence stretched like a held breath. The Guardian remained perfectly still. Selene's confidence flickered for just a moment before reasserting itself. "Great Guardian," she tried again, stepping closer to the massive stone form. "I am Selene of noble blood, raised in sacred tradition. I have prepared my entire life for this moment." Still nothing. A murmur rippled through the crowd. This wasn't how the ceremony was supposed to proceed. According to legend, the Guardian should have awakened immediately upon seeing a worthy vessel, should have opened ancient eyes and recognized the nobility before it. Perhaps it needs more time, Elder Marcus suggested, his voice tight with barely concealed panic. The slumber has been long. The awakening process may require patience. But even as he spoke, Lyra felt something changing in the air around her, a vibration that started in her bones and spread outward, making her teeth ache and her vision blur. The shadows seemed to deepen, pressing against her skin like living things. Inside the chamber, the Guardian's stone eyelids began to crack. The sound was like thunder breaking, like mountains splitting, like the first breath of creation itself. Massive stone eyes opened with grinding slowness, revealing depths of gold and silver fire that had burned since the world was young. Ancient intelligence looked out through those eyes, older than kingdoms, deeper than memory. The Guardian was awake. It turned its massive head with careful deliberation, ancient gaze sweeping across the assembled pack. Every person it looked upon seemed to shrink beneath that stare, nobles and commoners alike reduced to insignificance before such primal authority. Its attention passed over Selene without pause, passed over Darius, over Elder Marcus, over every worthy candidate present. The Guardian showed no interest in their nobility, their breeding, their careful preparation. It kept searching, kept looking, ancient head turning with increasing urgency, until its burning gaze found Lyra. She tried to shrink deeper into the shadows, to make herself invisible as she always had, but those golden eyes locked onto her with the force of revelation. Recognition blazed between them like lightning, immediate and undeniable. The Guardian saw her, truly saw her, and slowly, impossibly, the ancient creature began to rise. Stone limbs moved with grinding majesty as the Guardian lifted itself from centuries of slumber. It stood to its full height, towering over the sacred chamber like a living mountain, wings spreading wide enough to blot out the torchlight. When it moved, the very air seemed to bow in reverence. The assembled pack fell to their knees in terror and awe. This was power beyond their comprehension, beyond their ability to control or command. This was the force that had shaped the world when it was young and wild and perfect. And it walked directly toward Lyra. Each footstep shook the ground like an earthquake. The Guardian's burning gaze never left her face as it approached, ancient intelligence examining something in her that she didn't know existed. She wanted to run, wanted to hide, wanted to deny whatever impossible thing was happening, but her feet wouldn't move. The Guardian reached the outer circle where Lyra cowered behind her pillar. It stopped directly before her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from its stone form, could smell the scent of deep earth and older magic. And then, with deliberate ceremony, the ancient creature lowered its massive head until its burning forehead nearly touched her trembling hands. The Guardian was bowing to her. The silence that followed was absolute. No one breathed, no one moved, no one dared break the spell of witnessing the impossible. Lyra stared at the Guardian's bent head, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. This couldn't be happening. Creatures of legend didn't bow to vessel girls. Ancient powers didn't choose the worthless, the broken, the nothing. No, Selene's voice cracked across the silence like a whip. No, this is wrong. I am the worthy one. I am the chosen vessel. But the Guardian paid no attention to her protests. It remained bowed before Lyra, ancient eyes never leaving her face, waiting for something she didn't understand. Waiting for her to accept what she had never dared dream, that she was chosen, that she was worthy, that she was everything she had been told she could never be. The world held its breath as Lyra reached out with trembling fingers to touch the Guardian's stone head, and felt the first crack in the prison that had held her true self captive her entire life. Lyra ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out beneath her, finally collapsing against the rough bark of an ancient oak deep in the forest that bordered the ceremonial grounds. The Guardian's touch still tingled on her fingertips like electricity, like fire, like recognition she couldn't understand or accept. Behind her, chaos erupted from the sacred chamber as voices rose in shocked disbelief, in fury, in questions that had no answers. She had fled before anyone could stop her, before anyone could demand explanations she didn't have. The impossible had happened. The Guardian had chosen her. Her, the vessel girl, the nothing, the mistake. Running won't change what happened, child. Lyra spun toward the voice, her heart hammering against her ribs. Elder Mira stepped out from behind a cluster of pine trees, her silver hair gleaming in the moonlight that filtered through the canopy above. Unlike the other pack elders, Mira had always been kind to Lyra, offering small smiles when no one was watching, leaving extra portions at the servants' table. "I don't understand," Lyra whispered, her voice breaking on the words. "The Guardian was supposed to choose Selene. She's noble, she's pure, she's everything I'm not. Why would it bow to me?" Mira's ancient eyes, the colour of storm clouds, studied her with an intensity that made Lyra want to shrink into the shadows. "What do you remember about your childhood before you came to serve the pack?" "Nothing," Lyra said automatically. It was the truth she had always known, the story she had been told since she was small enough to believe it. "I was found as an infant, abandoned. The pack took me in out of charity. I owe them everything." "Do you dream, child?" The question was so unexpected that Lyra blinked in confusion. Everyone dreams. "Not everyone dreams of silver wolves running beneath ancient stars," Mira said softly. "Not everyone hears voices calling from the deep forest, speaking words in a language that died before kingdoms were born. Not everyone wakes with their hands glowing silver light that fades before they can truly see it." Lyra's breath caught. She did dream of silver wolves, had been dreaming of them her entire life. Dreams so vivid she could feel the wind in her fur, taste the freedom on her tongue, hear the ancient songs that made her wolf cry out in longing. Dreams she had never told anyone because vessel girls weren't supposed to dream of running free. And sometimes, in the moments between sleeping and waking, she had seen her hands shimmer with light that couldn't possibly be there. "How do you know about my dreams?" she whispered. Mira moved closer, her weathered hands reaching up to frame Lyra's face with surprising gentleness. "Because I was there the night you arrived, child. I was the one who found you in the sacred grove, wrapped in cloth that sparkled like starlight, surrounded by silver wolves that vanished the moment I approached. You were no abandoned infant. You were placed there deliberately, hidden there for protection." "That's impossible," Lyra breathed. But even as she spoke, something was stirring in the depths of her memory. Fragments of sensation, of warmth, of voices speaking words that felt familiar, even though she had never heard them. "Your true name is not Lyra," Mira continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "It is Lysandra. Lysandra of the first pack, last heir to the bloodline that ruled these lands when magic flowed like rivers and ancient creatures walked openly among the wolves." The world tilted around her. Lysandra. The name resonated in her bones like a bell, struck in perfect harmony, like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. "The first pack died out centuries ago," she managed. "Everyone knows that." "Everyone believes what they were told to believe," Mira corrected. The first pack was hunted to near extinction by those who feared their power, who wanted to rule through politics and force rather than ancient right. The last of the royal line was hidden away, her abilities suppressed, her memories sealed. She was raised as a servant so that no one would think to look for a queen among the shadows. Lyra shook her head violently, backing away from Mira's gentle hands. "You're lying. I can't be. I'm nothing. I'm nobody. I don't have any power, any bloodline, any—" "The suppression rituals were performed on you every full moon from infancy," Mira interrupted. "Silver chains blessed with binding magic, herbs that clouded memory, chants that buried your wolf so deep you could barely sense its presence. I participated in them, child. I helped trap you in this false life because I believed it was the only way to keep you alive." The admission hit like a physical blow. Lyra staggered backward, her vision swimming as pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed began falling into place. The monthly ceremonies where she was made to drink bitter tea that left her sick for days, the silver jewellery she was required to wear that burned against her skin, the way her wolf felt muffled, distant, like it was trapped behind glass. "No," she whispered, but the word had no strength behind it. "The Guardian recognised what we have been hiding," Mira said, her voice heavy with regret and relief in equal measure. "Ancient creatures see truth, not the lies we wrap around it. It bowed to you because you are its rightful queen, the blood it was created to serve and protect." A sound made them both turn. Footsteps crashed through the underbrush, heavy and purposeful. Darius emerged from the shadows between the trees, his silver eyes wild with something that looked like desperation. He stopped when he saw them, his gaze locking onto Lyra's face with an intensity that stole her breath. "I felt you running," he said, his voice rough with emotion she didn't understand. "Felt your terror, your confusion. The bond pulled me after you before I could stop myself." "Bond?" Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. Darius stepped closer, and she could see the struggle playing out across his features. Confusion warring with recognition, duty battling desire, political necessity crushing something that felt like hope. "You feel it too," he said, not quite a question. "The connection, the pull, the way the air changes when we're near each other." She did feel it, had been feeling it since the moment she first saw him, an electric current that ran between them like golden thread, binding them together in ways that made no political sense, no logical sense, no sense at all except to the wild part of her that had been caged for too long. "The mate bond," Mira breathed, wonder colouring her voice. "I should have realised. The Guardian didn't just recognise her bloodline. It recognised the connection between you. Ancient creatures always know." Mate bond. The words echoed in Lyra's head, and she did not know if they came from her buried wolf, or from the recognition still humming between her and Darius, or from some deeper truth she had never been allowed to acknowledge. "This changes everything," Darius said, his eyes never leaving her face. "If you are truly who Mira believes you are, if the Guardian's choice means what I think it means, then—" "Then she is dead the moment Selene learns the truth," Mira interrupted grimly. "The political alliance your betrothal represents is worth more than one girl's life, royal blood or not. There are forces at play here that will not hesitate to eliminate any threat to their plans." As if summoned by her words, voices echoed through the forest. Search parties, hunting parties, coming to drag Lyra back to face questions she couldn't answer about powers she didn't understand. Darius moved to stand between Lyra and the sound of approaching footsteps, every line of his body radiating protective fury. "They won't touch her," he said, and the promise in his voice was backed by enough deadly intent to make even Mira step back. But they all knew the truth. Political alliances were stronger than personal bonds. Royal duty outweighed individual desire. And somewhere in the darkness, Selene was planning how to reclaim what she believed was rightfully hers, no matter the cost. The mate bond hummed between Lyra and Darius like a living thing, golden and impossible and doomed. She was no longer nobody, no longer nothing. She was the lost heir to an ancient throne and the fated mate of a king who could never claim her. She was everything she had never dared dream of being, and she was already running out of time. The days that followed were a blur of whispered conversations and careful avoidance, of stolen glances across courtyards and the constant ache of a bond that could never be fulfilled. Lyra had returned to her duties as vessel keeper, but everything had changed. The pack watched her now with a mixture of suspicion and fascination, their gazes following her movements as if she might transform before their eyes. The Guardian had chosen her, and that choice hung over the ceremonial grounds like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. She knelt beside the sacred spring, filling water vessels for the morning rituals, when Selene's shadow fell across her like a blade. "Stand up," Selene commanded, her voice honey-sweet with underlying venom. "We need to talk." Lyra rose slowly, keeping her eyes downcast. She had been dreading this moment, knowing it would come, hoping against hope that Selene might accept what had happened and move forward with grace. She should have known better. "Look at me," Selene hissed, and when Lyra reluctantly raised her gaze, she found hatred burning in those perfect amber eyes. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me? What your little performance has destroyed?" "I didn't do anything," Lyra said quietly. "I didn't ask for the Guardian to—" "To what? To make a mockery of everything sacred? To choose a servant over nobility?" Selene stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than screaming. "Let me make something very clear, Vessel Girl. Whatever trick you used, whatever dark magic you employed to fool that ancient creature, it changes nothing. I am still destined to be Alpha Queen. I am still worthy of the crown." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Lyra felt it settle into her bones like winter cold, the promise of violence wrapped in silk and civility. "I understand," she whispered, and she did. This was bigger than personal rivalry now. This was about power, about destiny, about everything Selene had been promised since birth. "Do you?" Selene smiled, and the expression was beautiful and terrible. "I wonder. Because accidents happen so easily around here. Servants fall into rivers and drown, they eat poisoned mushrooms, they disappear into the forest and are never seen again. Such tragic things, but what can be done? Vessel girls are so fragile." Lyra's buried wolf stirred uneasily, sensing danger even through the suppression magic that muffled its instincts. She nodded once, not trusting her voice, and Selene's smile widened. "Good girl, remember your place, and you might live to see another moon." After Selene glided away, leaving only the scent of expensive perfume and the promise of death, Lyra found herself walking toward the ancient chamber without conscious thought. The Guardian sat motionless once more, but she could feel its awareness pressing against her mind like warm sunlight. She approached carefully, half expecting someone to stop her, to remind her that Vessel girls didn't commune with legendary creatures. But the courtyard was empty, except for shadows and stone. "I don't understand," she whispered to the Guardian. "Why did you choose me? I'm nobody special. I don't have power or bloodline or anything that matters." The Guardian's stone eyelids flickered, and suddenly Lyra was elsewhere, elsewhen, standing in a moonlit grove surrounded by silver wolves, their eyes glowing with ancient wisdom. A woman's voice, warm with love and fierce with protection, spoke words in a language that felt like coming home. "You are the bridge between what was and what will be. Your blood carries the old magic, the pure magic, the magic that remembers when the world was young. Sleep now, little star. Sleep until it is time to wake." The vision shattered, leaving Lyra gasping beside the Guardian's massive form. Memory. Not imagination, but true memory breaking through decades of suppression. The woman's face had been her own, but older, regal, wearing a crown of silver leaves. Her mother, the true queen. "The suppressions are weakening," a familiar voice observed. Lyra spun to find Darius standing at the chamber's entrance, his silver eyes unreadable in the morning light. Her heart immediately began racing, the mate bond humming between them like a tuning fork struck in perfect harmony. "You felt it," she said, not quite a question. The vision, the memory, the crack in the magical barriers that had held her true self prisoner. "I feel everything," he admitted, stepping into the chamber with careful deliberation. "Your fear when Selene threatened you, your confusion when the memories surface, your longing when you look at me across crowded rooms." Heat flooded her cheeks. "I don't lie." His voice was gentle but implacable. "Not about this. The bond doesn't allow for deception between us." He moved closer, and she could smell his scent, wild and masculine and utterly intoxicating. Her wolf, even buried as it was, recognized him as mate, as home, as everything she had been searching for without knowing she was lost. "This is impossible," she whispered. "You're betrothed to Selene. You're going to be her husband, her king, her—" "Mate bonds don't care about politics," Darius interrupted, and there was pain in his voice, raw and honest. "They don't care about alliances or arrangements or what's best for the kingdom. They simply are." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed his fingertips against her cheek. The contact sent lightning through her system, made her gasp with the intensity of connection, of recognition, of rightness. "I have spent my entire life doing what was expected of me," he said quietly, "marrying for alliance, ruling for stability, sacrificing personal happiness for political necessity. But when I look at you, when I feel this bond pulling us together, I find myself wondering what would happen if I chose differently." "You can't," she breathed, even as she leaned into his touch like a flower seeking sunlight. "The territories need unity. Your people need—" "My people need a queen who can channel the Guardian's power," he said firmly, "and the Guardian chose you." Before she could respond, before she could remind him of all the reasons this was doomed, his lips found hers. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, but when she melted against him with a soft sound of surrender, it deepened into something desperate and claiming. The mate bond sang between them, golden light that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with souls recognizing their other half. For one perfect moment, politics and duty and impossible circumstances faded away, leaving only the truth that burned in their joined hearts. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Darius rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "whatever we have to face, you need to know that this is real. You are real, and you are worth every sacrifice I might have to make." Footsteps echoed from the courtyard beyond, sharp and purposeful. They sprang apart like guilty children, but not before Lyra saw something shift in the shadows near the chamber entrance. Someone had been watching. Someone had seen. As Darius strode away with forced casualness and Lyra tried to control her racing heart, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had just signed their own death warrant. The mate bond hummed between them like a beacon in the darkness, impossible to hide, impossible to deny, impossible to survive. And somewhere in the shadows, enemies were already moving to destroy what they could never understand. The sacred grove had always been a place of peace, where ancient oaks whispered secrets to the wind and moonlight painted silver patterns on moss-covered stones. Tonight, it would become a place of blood. Lyra walked along the familiar path, her heart heavy with the weight of the message she had received. Elder Marcus had summoned her for a private ceremony, a ritual to help her commune with the Guardian and understand her connection to its power. She should have been suspicious, should have questioned why such a ceremony would take place in darkness, away from witnesses. But 3 days of Selena's subtle threats and meaningful looks had worn her defences thin. She was tired of being afraid, tired of jumping at shadows, tired of pretending the mate bond with Darius didn't exist when it hummed between them like a living thing every time they were in the same room. The grove opened before her, bathed in silver moonlight that made the ancient standing stones glow like beacons. She had been here countless times to gather herbs and commune with nature, but tonight something felt different. The air was too still, the shadows too deep, the silence too absolute. "Elder Marcus," she called softly, her voice swallowed by the unnatural quiet. Movement in her peripheral vision made her turn, but instead of the kindly elder, 3 figures emerged from behind the standing stones. Their faces were hidden by dark hoods, but she recognized the lean build of Selene's most loyal followers, wolves who would do anything for their future queen. "Where is Elder Marcus?" Lyra asked, backing toward the grove's entrance even as her heart began racing with primal fear. "He sends his regrets," the centre figure replied, and beneath the hood she caught a glimpse of cruel eyes and a predator's smile. "But he wanted us to ensure you received proper instruction about your place in the natural order." They moved to surround her with practiced coordination, cutting off her escape routes. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment attack. This was planned, orchestrated, designed to look like a tragic accident when they found her body in the morning. "Selene promised there wouldn't be any witnesses," another attacker said conversationally. "Something about wild animals being so unpredictable these days. Such a shame when vessel girls wander into dangerous territory alone." Lyra's buried wolf stirred uneasily, sensing mortal danger even through the suppression magic that kept it caged. But the barriers that had held her true nature prisoner for 20 years were still too strong. She was trapped in human form, vulnerable and alone. "Please," she whispered, knowing it was useless but unable to stop herself. "I never asked for any of this. I don't want to challenge Selene or threaten anyone. I just want to serve quietly." "Too late for that," the leader snarled and shifted. The transformation was violent and swift, bones cracking and reforming, human features melting into lupine savagery. Within seconds, 3 massive wolves stalked toward her, their eyes glowing with predatory hunger and cold purpose. Lyra ran. She crashed through the underbrush with desperate speed, branches tearing at her clothes and skin as she fled deeper into the forest. Behind her, howls split the night air as her pursuers gave chase, their enhanced senses making her flight futile but necessary. A root caught her foot and sent her sprawling across the forest floor. She rolled, trying to regain her footing, but they were already on her. Jaws snapped inches from her throat as she threw herself backward, her scream echoing through the trees. Pain exploded across her shoulder as claws raked through cloth and flesh. Blood flowed hot and fast, the scent driving her attackers into greater frenzy. They circled her like the predators they were, taking their time now that she was wounded, savouring the fear they could smell radiating from her skin. "Nothing personal, vessel girl." The leader's voice was distorted by his wolf form, but still recognisable. "Just politics." Another slash, this time across her ribs. Lyra cried out, falling to her knees as agony lanced through her body. The suppression magic that had kept her wolf buried was strong, but pain was stronger, terror was stronger. The desperate need to survive was strongest of all. Something inside her chest began to crack. The barriers that had held her true nature prisoner for 2 decades started to splinter as her wolf fought against its magical chains. She could feel it clawing its way toward freedom, desperate to protect them both, frustrated by the bindings that kept it trapped. "Fight," she whispered to herself, blood running down her arm. "Fight back." But human strength was no match for 3 adult wolves, and her own wolf remained just beyond her reach. The attackers sensed her helplessness, moving in for the killing blow. That was when the forest exploded into silver light. Power erupted from somewhere deep in Lyra's core, shattering the suppression magic like glass. The barriers that had contained her true nature for 20 years crumbled all at once, unleashing decades of repressed strength in a single devastating surge. Her wolf broke free with a howl of pure rage. The transformation was agony and ecstasy combined, every bone in her body breaking and reforming as her human shape dissolved into something far more primal. Her spine elongated, her face pushed forward into a muzzle. Her hands became claws capable of rending flesh from bone. But unlike the brown and grey pelts of her attackers, her fur gleamed silver-white in the moonlight, marking her as something extraordinary. Ancient, royal, dangerous. The 3 wolves attacking her stumbled backward in shock. This wasn't the helpless vessel girl they had been sent to eliminate. This was something from legend, from the old stories, from bloodlines that predated their understanding of power. Lyra's wolf was magnificent and terrible, larger than any normal wolf, with eyes that burned like silver fire. When she stood to her full height, she towered over her would-be assassins, every line of her form radiating lethal intent. One of the attackers whimpered and tried to flee. She was on him before he made it 3 steps, her jaws closing around his throat with bone-crushing force. He went limp instantly, and she tossed his body aside like a broken toy before turning her burning gaze on the remaining 2. They attacked together, hoping to overwhelm her with coordinated strikes. It was a mistake. Her wolf moved with fluid grace, dodging claws and teeth, while her own attacks found their marks with surgical precision. She was faster than them, stronger than them, more ruthless than they had ever imagined possible. Within minutes, all 3 assassins lay broken and bleeding on the forest floor. Lyra stood over their bodies, her silver fur gleaming with moonlight and blood, her chest heaving with the aftermath of violence. The wolf in her wanted to howl in triumph, to declare her dominance to the night sky, but the human part of her was horrified by what she had done, what she was capable of doing. Footsteps crashed through the undergrowth, and Darius burst into the grove with several of his guards behind him. He had felt her terror through the mate bond, had come running the moment he sensed her mortal danger. He stopped short when he saw her, his silver eyes widening with something between awe and recognition. The massive silver wolf standing amid the carnage was beyond beautiful, beyond powerful, beyond anything he had imagined possible. Lysandra, he breathed, using her true name for the first time. At the sound of his voice, her wolf form began to shift and blur. The transformation back to human was gentler than the initial change, but she collapsed to her knees as soon as it was complete, naked and bloodied and trembling with shock. Darius was beside her in an instant, wrapping his cloak around her shoulders, pulling her against his chest with gentle strength. "You're safe," he murmured against her hair. "I've got you. You're safe now." But even as he held her, even as his guards began securing the scene and disposing of the evidence, they both knew the truth. This attack was just the beginning. Selene would escalate now, would become more desperate, more dangerous, and Lyra could no longer pretend to be powerless. Her wolf was awake, her bloodline was manifesting, and there would be no hiding what she truly was. The war for her life had only just begun. The silver-lined cell was a cage within a cage, designed to hold creatures whose power ran deeper than flesh and bone. Lyra pressed her back against the cold stone wall, trying to ignore the way the blessed silver burned against her skin wherever the manacles touched. 3 days had passed since the grove, 3 days since her wolf had broken free in a surge of violence and ancient fury. 3 days since everything she thought she knew about herself had shattered like glass. They had found her covered in blood that wasn't her own, standing over bodies that told a story no one wanted to hear. The official report claimed she had been attacked by rogues, that her transformation had been a desperate survival response. But whispers followed her through the corridors, speculation about what kind of creature could tear apart 3 adult wolves with such devastating efficiency. "The silver will keep her contained," she heard Elder Marcus explaining to someone beyond the cell door. "Whatever power awakened in her that night, the blessed metal will suppress it until we can decide what to do with her." What to do with her? As if she were a problem to be solved, rather than a person whose life hung in the balance. The heavy door creaked open, and Selene stepped into the narrow space like a queen surveying her domain. She looked radiant even in the dungeon's dim light, her auburn hair perfectly arranged, her ceremonial robes pristine white against the darkness. The picture of nobility and grace. "Hello, vessel girl," Selene said softly, her voice honey-sweet with underlying venom. "Comfortable accommodations, I trust?" Lyra said nothing. The silver burned constantly now, a low-grade agony that made it impossible to reach her wolf, impossible to access the power that had saved her life in the grove. She was human again, vulnerable, exactly where Selene wanted her. "You killed 3 pack members," Selene continued conversationally, settling onto the single wooden stool like it was a throne. 3 loyal wolves who were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Such a tragedy. They tried to murder me, Lyra whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. Did they? Celine's perfect eyebrows rose in mock surprise. Strange. The evidence suggests you lured them to that grove with promises of, what was it? Secret information about the Guardian's true purpose? And when they arrived, you transformed and slaughtered them like animals. The lie was so smooth, so perfectly crafted, that for a moment Lyra wondered if she was losing her mind. Had she imagined the ambush, the coordinated attack, the clear intent to kill her and make it look accidental? You know that's not what happened, she said quietly. I know what the surviving evidence tells us, Celine replied. I know that a dangerous creature masquerading as a servant girl has been exposed for what she truly is. A killer, a monster, a threat to pack security that needs to be eliminated before she can strike again. The words hit like physical blows, each one designed to break down her sense of reality, to make her doubt her own memories. Lyra closed her eyes, trying to hold on to the truth of what had happened, the truth of who she was. The Pack Council meets tomorrow, Celine continued. They will vote on your fate. Execution seems the most likely outcome, given the severity of your crimes, unless... Lyra opened her eyes, meeting Celine's gaze directly. Unless what? Unless you confess, publicly. Admit that you used dark magic to fool the Guardian into choosing you. Admit that you seduced Alpha King Darius with unnatural influence. Admit that you are exactly what you appear to be, a vessel girl who overreached and must pay the price. The confession would destroy everything, would invalidate the Guardian's choice, break whatever fragile protection her royal bloodline might provide, and hand Celine everything she had ever wanted on a silver platter. And if I refuse? Lyra asked, though she already knew the answer. Celine's smile was beautiful and terrible. Then you die, slowly, publicly, as an example to others who might think to challenge the natural order of things. After Selene left, the silence stretched endlessly. Lyra tried to reach for her wolf, tried to access even a fragment of the power that had surged through her in the grove, but the silver held her abilities in chains as surely as the metal bound her wrists. She was trapped, powerless, exactly what she had always been before that night when everything changed. Footsteps echoed in the corridor again, but these were different, heavier, more purposeful. The door opened to reveal Darius, his silver eyes wild with barely controlled fury. Behind him, 2 guards waited nervously, clearly uncomfortable with allowing their king into a cell with a suspected killer. "Leave us," he commanded without looking back. "Your Majesty, regulations require—" "Leave us." The guards retreated hastily, closing the door behind them. In the sudden privacy, Darius dropped to his knees beside her, his hands hovering over the silver manacles like he wanted to tear them away, but feared what the blessed metal might do to his own flesh. "This is a lie," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "All of it. The charges, the evidence, the official story. I know what really happened in that grove." "Do you?" Lyra's laugh was bitter, broken. "Because I'm starting to wonder if any of it was real. If the wolf, the power, the Guardian's choice, if it was all just delusion born from desperation." "Look at me," Darius commanded gently, and when she raised her gaze to his, she saw truth blazing in those silver depths. "The mate bond doesn't lie. I felt every moment of your terror that night, every surge of power as your wolf broke free, every ounce of your fury as you fought for survival. You are not delusional. You are not broken. You are everything you believe yourself to be." The words were a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Lyra grasped them desperately, using his certainty to anchor herself to reality when everything else felt like shifting sand. "They're going to kill me," she whispered. "Tomorrow, when the council votes, they're going to sentence me to death for defending myself." "No." The word was flat, absolute, backed by power that made the air around them thicken with authority. I won't allow it." "You can't stop it," Lyra said, her heart breaking at the pain in his eyes. "Your betrothal to Selene is too important, the political alliance too vital. You can't throw away your kingdom's future for a vessel girl who might be living in fantasy." "You are not a vessel girl," Darius said fiercely. "You are Lysandra of the first pack, heir to a bloodline that ruled these lands when they were young and wild. You are the Guardian's chosen, my fated mate, and the only woman I have ever loved." The confession hung between them like a bridge made of starlight and impossible hope. Lyra felt tears she hadn't known she was capable of shedding slide down her cheeks. "Love isn't enough," she whispered. "Not against politics, not against tradition, not against the weight of duty that binds you to another." Darius reached through the bars to cup her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the urgency burning in his eyes. "Then let me show you what is enough," he said quietly. Before she could ask what he meant, his lips found hers through the silver bars. The kiss was desperate, claiming, full of promises he might not be able to keep, and devotion that transcended political necessity. The mate bond flared between them like golden fire, strong enough to burn through despair, bright enough to illuminate hope. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Darius rested his forehead against the cool metal that separated them. "Trust me," he said quietly. "Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever choice I have to make, trust that I will not let you die for being exactly what fate intended you to be." After he left, Lyra curled into herself on the narrow cot, the taste of his kiss still burning on her lips. Tomorrow the council would vote. Tomorrow her fate would be decided by people who saw her as a problem to be eliminated, rather than a person deserving of life. But for the first time since her capture, she felt something other than despair. She felt the dangerous, fragile stirring of hope. The silver chains had held her for 7 days, but ancient bloodlines were stronger than blessed metal. Lyra felt it beginning just before dawn, a tremor deep in her bones that had nothing to do with the cold stone cell or the fear that lived permanently in her chest now. The suppression that had kept her wolf-caged was cracking, hairline fractures spreading through magical barriers that had never been designed to contain power this old, this pure, this furious. Something was calling to her, something vast and patient and older than kingdoms, the Guardian. She could feel its presence pressing against her consciousness from across the ceremonial grounds, ancient mind touching hers with gentle insistence. The creature that had chosen her, that had recognized what others refused to see, was reaching through stone and silver and suppression magic to wake what had been deliberately buried. "Rise, daughter of the first pack," a voice whispered in her mind, speaking words in a language that predated human civilization. "Your bloodline calls, your destiny waits. Rise and reclaim what was stolen." Power surged through her like molten gold, burning away 20 years of suppression rituals in a single devastating wave. The silver manacles, blessed and consecrated and designed to hold supernatural prisoners, began to smoke where they touched her skin, then crack, then shatter completely as magic older than their creation overwhelmed their purpose. Lyra screamed as her wolf exploded from its magical prison. The transformation was nothing like the desperate shift in the grove. This was awakening, true awakening, every cell in her body remembering what it had been before fear and politics had forced it into hiding. Her bones lengthened and strengthened, her muscles expanded with predatory power. Her senses exploded outward until she could hear conversations happening in the great hall 3 floors above. But it was more than physical change. Ancient memories flooded back like dam burst, showing her glimpses of what the first pack had truly been. Not just rulers, but guardians of something sacred, protectors of magic itself. She saw silver wolves running beneath starlit skies, their eyes glowing with power that could reshape reality. She saw her mother, the true queen, making the ultimate sacrifice to hide her daughter from those who would destroy the bloodline forever. She saw her own infant hands glowing with silver light as suppression rituals carved away pieces of her soul, leaving her empty, broken, convinced she was nothing. The cell walls cracked under the pressure of her awakening power. Ancient stone, laid by hands that had revered the first pack, recognized what was happening and yielded before it. Cracks spread outward like spiderwebs, mortar crumbling as magic centuries in the making finally broke free. Lyra's wolf form blazed with silver fire that cast dancing shadows on crumbling walls. She was massive now, larger than any natural creature, her fur gleaming like liquid moonlight, her eyes burning with the accumulated fury of 2 decades spent believing she was worthless. She was magnificent. She was terrible. She was everything they had tried to prevent her from becoming. The Guardian's call grew stronger, more urgent. It was moving, she realized, rising from its chamber, responding to her awakening with its own ancient power. She could feel it crossing the ceremonial grounds with grinding footsteps that shook the earth, coming to stand witness to what she truly was. Above her, voices rose in alarm as guards discovered the destroyed cell, as pack members felt the wave of supernatural power rolling across their territories like a tsunami. She heard her name spoken with fear, with awe, with the dawning realization that they had caged something beyond their understanding. Lysandra, her true name, spoken with the reverence it deserved. She padded through the corridors of her prison on silent paws, silver light radiating from her form like captured starlight. Guards who encountered her fell to their knees without conscious thought, overwhelmed by the authority that poured from her like a physical force. This was what royal bloodline truly meant, not politics or ceremony, but power so ancient and pure that reality itself bent in recognition. The great hall erupted into chaos when she appeared at the main entrance. Pack members scattered like leaves before wind, their wolves cowering in submission to something that transcended their understanding of hierarchy. At the far end of the hall, Elder Marcus stood frozen behind the ceremonial podium where he had been preparing to announce her execution. "Impossible," he breathed, his face pale with terror and disbelief. "The silver was blessed, the suppression complete. You should be nothing. You should be nobody." Lyra's wolf form began to shift and blur as she approached the podium. The transformation back to human was fluid now, controlled, her consciousness fully merged with the power she had carried since birth. She stood naked before the assembled pack, silver light still emanating from her skin, and she no longer felt shame or fear or the crushing weight of unworthiness. She felt like coming home. "I remember," she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "I remember who I was before you made me forget. I remember the silver wolves that protected me as an infant. I remember my mother's voice as she sang the old songs. I remember the crown you buried, the bloodline you denied, the power you tried so hard to steal." Ancient memories crystallized into perfect clarity, the suppression rituals, the deliberate destruction of records, the careful cultivation of her belief that she was nothing, nobody, unworthy of consideration or kindness or love. "You knew," she continued, her gaze finding Elder Marcus among the crowd of terrified faces. "You have always known exactly who I am. Lysandra of the first pack, last heir to the bloodline that ruled when magic flowed like rivers through the world. You participated in the rituals that buried my wolf, the ceremonies that stole my memories, the lies that convinced me I deserved nothing more than servitude." The great hall's massive doors opened with a grinding sound that echoed like thunder. The Guardian entered, its ancient form moving with careful dignity, stone eyes blazing with golden fire as it surveyed the scene. When its gaze found Lyra, the creature's massive head dipped in a bow of acknowledgement and respect. "The Guardian knows," Lyra said, silver light pulsing brighter around her as her power responded to the ancient creature's presence. "It has always known. When it chose me over every other candidate, it wasn't making a mistake. It was correcting one that had lasted 20 years too long." She looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of pack members who had dismissed her, ignored her, treated her like a broken thing unworthy of notice. They saw her now. They saw what she had always been beneath the lies and suppression and carefully constructed invisibility. "I am Lysandra of the First Pack," she declared, her voice ringing with authority that made the ancient stones themselves tremble. "I am the Guardian's chosen. I am what you tried so hard to destroy." Silver light erupted from her form like a nova, filling the great hall with radiance that spoke of power reclaimed, identity restored, and a queen finally awake to claim her throne. The vessel girl was gone forever. In her place stood something far more dangerous, the rightful heir to everything they had stolen. The great hall fell into absolute silence as silver light continued to pulse from Lysandra's form, each wave of power making the ancient stones themselves tremble with recognition. She stood transformed, no longer the broken vessel girl who had cowered in shadows, but something magnificent and terrible, radiating authority that transcended politics or ceremony. The Guardian loomed beside her like a mountain given life, its golden eyes burning with satisfaction as it witnessed the awakening it had waited centuries to see. Then footsteps echoed from the main entrance, sharp and purposeful against the stunned quiet. Darius entered the hall with his royal guard flanking him, but he stopped short when his silver gaze found her. The mate bond flared between them like lightning, recognition and desire and desperate love crackling through the connection that bound their souls together. She saw the moment he understood what had happened, saw his eyes widen as he took in her transformed state, the silver light that marked her as something beyond mortal comprehension. "Lysandra," he breathed, her true name falling from his lips like a prayer. Behind him, Selene appeared in the doorway, resplendent in ceremonial robes of white and gold, a crown of silver leaves adorning her auburn hair. She had come expecting a coronation, expecting to claim her place as Alpha Queen and complete the political alliance that would cement her power forever. Instead, she found her carefully constructed world crumbling to ash. "What is the meaning of this?" Selene demanded, her perfect composure cracking as she took in the scene before her. "Why is that creature free? Why are you all kneeling before a servant girl?" "Because she is no servant," Darius said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "She never was." He began walking toward Lysandra, each step deliberate and final, his royal authority radiating outward like ripples on still water. The assembled pack watched in stunned fascination as their Alpha King crossed the hall, moving away from his betrothed toward a woman who blazed with ancient power. "Your Majesty," Selene's voice held a note of panic now. "Remember your duty. Remember the alliance our union represents. You cannot throw away everything for this pretender." Darius reached Lysandra and stopped directly before her, close enough that the silver light emanating from her skin painted him in ethereal radiance. The mate bond hummed between them with such intensity that several pack members gasped, feeling the echo of connection that transcended flesh and blood. "I have spent my entire life choosing duty over desire," he said, his eyes never leaving Lysandra's face. "Choosing politics over passion, choosing what was expected over what was right." He reached up slowly, gently, and cupped her face in his hands. "I am done making that choice." "Darius," she whispered, her voice breaking on his name. "You are Lysandra of the First Pack," he continued, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized she was shedding. "The Guardian's chosen, my fated mate, and I choose you over duty, over politics, over every alliance that requires me to deny what my soul knows to be true." Before anyone could speak, before Selene could protest or Elder Marcus could object, Darius dropped to one knee before her. The gesture sent shockwaves through the assembled crowd, a king kneeling before someone they had dismissed as worthless just days before. "I reject the betrothal that was arranged without our consent," he declared, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "I claim Lysandra as my true mate, my queen, my equal in all things." The Guardian's head lifted in a sound that was part growl, part song, ancient approval reverberating through the stone hall. The creature's golden eyes blazed brighter as it witnessed the mate bond acknowledged, the political barriers finally crumbling before truth. "No!" Selene's scream of fury shattered the moment like breaking glass. She stalked across the hall, her perfect face twisted with rage and desperation. "This is not how it ends. I am the noble one, the pure one, the worthy one. I will not be displaced by a vessel girl with delusions of grandeur." Power crackled around her as she shifted, her human form dissolving into a massive red-furred wolf with eyes like burning coals. She launched herself at Lysandra with killing intent, claws extended, jaws open to tear out the throat of the woman who had stolen everything she believed was rightfully hers. Lysandra moved with fluid grace, her own power responding to the threat without conscious thought. She didn't shift to wolf form, didn't need to. Silver light erupted from her hands as she caught Selene mid-leap, ancient magic responding to protect what the bloodline had claimed as its own. Selene hit an invisible barrier with bone-jarring force and crashed to the stone floor, her wolf form stunned and disoriented. When she tried to rise, tried to attack again, the silver light intensified, pressing down on her with the weight of centuries. "Enough," Lysandra said quietly, but her voice carried the authority of queens who had ruled when the world was young. "You have threatened me for the last time." She could have killed Selene then, could have let her ancient power tear apart the woman who had orchestrated assassination attempts, who had manipulated evidence, who had tried to destroy everything she held dear. The magic sang in her veins, eager to eliminate the threat permanently. Instead, she chose mercy. "You are banished," she declared, silver light pulsing with finality. "From this pack, from these territories, from any land that recognizes the authority of the first pack bloodline. You will leave before dawn and never return. This is the only warning you will receive." Selene shifted back to human form, her perfect features marred by cuts and bruises, her ceremonial robes torn and bloodied. For a moment, hatred burned so bright in her amber eyes that several pack members stepped back in alarm. Then she looked around the hall, taking in the faces of wolves who had once hung on her every word, now watching her with disgust and dismissal. She saw the Guardian's approval of her defeat, saw Darius rising to stand beside Lysandra with protective fury radiating from every line of his body. She saw that she had lost everything. Without a word, Selene turned and fled the hall, her footsteps echoing like the retreat of a broken dream. In the silence that followed, Darius took Lysandra's hands in his, the mate bond flaring golden between them as their souls recognized what their hearts had always known. "You are my mate," he said quietly, the words carrying to every corner of the vast space. "And I am yours." "Always," she whispered back, silver light dancing around them like captured starlight. The Guardian's song filled the hall then, ancient and joyful, a sound like the world celebrating its own rebirth. Pack members who had dismissed her as nothing began to kneel one by one until the entire assembly was bowed before their true queen. Lysandra looked out over the sea of bent heads and felt something settle into place inside her chest. Not just power or recognition or the mate bond that connected her to Darius. She felt complete.